In this video, I will guide you through the rules of the Etherfields game. Join me now on your first game, where I will gradually familiarize you with all the rules. You will see them in the form of thematic blocks, making it easier to find them in the video and understand the individual stages of the game. You can find the table of contents in the description under the video. Just click the subject you are interested in to go to the respective part of the video and watch it, along with an example, so I encourage you to use it. I want you to get to know Etherfields in the easiest and most accessible manner. So, let's begin. The most important thing after opening the box is to not change the order of the cards and the secret tiles. Do not shuffle them, whether they are sealed or not. You can arrange them by sorting them into mini decks, using the dividers you can find in the box. Now, all you have to do is to prepare the elements with me in order to play the tutorial. In this tutorial, you can expect some spoilers, but be aware that the first dream was created by the publisher specifically for the purpose of learning the rules of the game and starting your adventure in Etherfields. Before beginning your first scenario, you have to choose the character you wish to play. Each player should choose one character. It is not recommended for one person to play several characters. In the basic version, you have 4 dreamers to choose from. The Gambler, a good choice if you like to play by tempting fate, relying on random dice rolls. The Gambler often relies on luck, but she can also manipulate it. The Specialist is an engineer, expert, and craftsman. He relies on the progress cards, slowly building his engine with bonuses during the game. The Tough Guy is persistent and resistant. He likes simple actions and usually uses brute force. He doesn't like prattling and circling around problems. The Free Spirit likes bending the rules, even the fundamental rules of the game. She does not accept barriers and laws. She does things her own way. Is this a difficult choice? Don't worry. As the game goes on, you will be able to change your dreamer, as well as have new players join your adventure. Now, prepare to begin the game. Take the dreamer board and select the corresponding miniature personal token of your character. Pick the basic action card which provides guidance and place it next to your board. Here you will find a brief description of your potential actions and activities. I will discuss and show how to perform them all later on in this tutorial. Now, take the starting influence deck of your character, consisting of 22 cards. Each deck is assigned to a particular character. Shuffle this deck and place it on the left side of the dreamer board. The discard pile will be on the right. Now, let's proceed to the rules. I will discuss the influence cards, their symbols, and their use. If you want to skip some of the rules, you can go to the model game using the interactive table of contents under this video. During your round, you can play the influence cards in several ways, spending intents and performing actions from them. In the top left corner of each card, you can find a symbol or symbols of intent. There are 3 types of those in the game. Green icons mean awareness, related to conversation, observation, and understanding. The yellow ones are cunning, related to movement, avoidance, and deception, while the red ones are wraith, mostly combat related. With these symbols, you will pay for the required action costs. If the card has more than 1 symbol, you have to choose only 1 to use, while the remaining ones are lost. In the top right corner of each influence card, you can see its purchase cost, expressed in Ether. Players can buy these cards in the shopping locations once it appears on the Dreamworld map. I will discuss this further on in the video. At the bottom of certain influence cards, you can see special actions. Their cost is visible above the text, on the left. Unless specified otherwise, you can play the influence cards only during your round, during the dreamer's phase. This rule does not apply to the cards with the lightning symbol, which can be also played during other dreamers' rounds or during the entity movement in the Dreamscape phase. If you take an action from the card, you cannot use the intent symbols. Also, if you play an influence card using the intent symbols, you cannot use the actions from the bottom of the card. The influence deck also contains progress cards. You cannot use actions and effects from the progress card if the card is in your hand. In order to use these actions and effects, first you have to place the card in your progress zone. You may do this at any moment of the game, as long as you pay its placement cost. This cost is indicated in the upper part of the card. After the placement of the progress card, you may use any action or effect on this card. For some actions, you need to pay their cost. It is always shown on the right side, above the action description. Each player can have up to 4 progress cards in their zone, including used, flipped progress cards, unless the masks and other effects change this limit. You cannot discard an active progress card to use it as an intent. Sometimes you will be required to flip a progress card. In that case, it becomes inactive, and you cannot use its effect until you unflip this card. If you wish to place a 5th card in your progress zone, first you have to discard one of the 4 cards already placed there. You can place 2 identical progress cards in the progress zone. Remember that certain rules of the game apply to the number of your active progress cards of a specific color. Any cards placed in the progress zone stay there until some effect forces you to discard them. For instance, Dreamer's Death. On the back of each influence card, you can find a special action for your character, which can be used only if this card is on the top of your influence deck. On the back of each influence card, you can find a special action for your character, which can be used only if this card is on the top of your influence deck. Therefore, you play it from the top of your draw stack rather than from your hand. The action cost is shown on the left side. In this case, it is 2 Wrath Intense. The Tough Guy's special skill allows him to avoid distress at the Dreamscape phase, as long as he decides to discard this card. Now, players, you can, but don't have to, choose one player to receive the first player marker. This rule is optional. The first player in Etherfields begins the game and resolves conflicts between the players, having the final say. However, you can make decisions as a group. The tutorial we are about to play together contains no story spoilers. You have to read the secret script book on your own. In order to start the first tutorial, prepare the board or the mat. Now, take the gate tile before you start, marked as I-01X. This number is always visible on the reverse in the upper right corner. Read the hint under the name of the tile. Below you can find the description of the location, as well as the required number of keys. For the tutorial dream, these 2 items are inactive. I will explain them to you further on in this video. Now, follow the description in the preparation section, located below. In this case, find all the tiles and the secret cards marked as I-01. You should take them out of the box. Among the secret tiles marked as I-01, find and resolve the setup tile. Turn it face up and place it on the field A2, according to the symbol visible in the Dreamscape area in the upper section of the board. On the left side of the card, you can see the Dreamer's entrance. This symbol is located on the grid between 2 spaces, meaning you can place your Dreamer miniature on either of them. Let's go back to the Dream Gate tile. Under the description of the setup, on each tile of the Dream Gate, you can see how many turn cards to prepare for the given dream. In this case, it's 12 cards. Prepare the turn deck. Shuffle the cards and place them in the appropriate slot on the board. You will learn more about the turn cards as you use them later on in this tutorial. Then, read the introduction in script 450 in the script book. On the reverse of the Dream Gate tile, you can see your goal for this session. For this dream, the goal is to learn the basic rules of the game. It also describes the special rules applicable to this dream and the possibility of leaving. That is what happens when you run out of time in this dream, if we run out of turns. Then, resolve the script with the number specified here. Now, prepare the luck die and the entity movement die. Place the tokens and markers close to the board. You can also prepare the hour counter, setting it respectively at 1 o'clock for 5 players, 2 o'clock for 4 players, 3 o'clock for 3 players, and 4 o'clock if there are 2 players. In this tutorial, You will learn the clock mechanics, but this will happen later on, during your own sessions. Let's see what a turn looks like. A turn consists of two phases: the Dreamer's phase and the Dreamscape phase. For now, let's focus on the Dreamer's phase, which is where we start. This phase consists of two steps. Step 1 is to draw cards. At this moment, each player draws 4 cards from their deck. You cannot draw more than your current hand size limit. The basic hand size limit is 6 cards. It can be increased by certain effects in the game. For instance, masks. Speaking of the hand size limit, remember that you can never hold more cards than your current hand size limit. Also, you cannot draw less cards than required. Before drawing cards, during the draw step, you can discard any number of cards from your hand. If at any time during the game you run out of influence cards from your deck and you have to draw additional ones, reshuffle the cards from the discard deck and create a new deck. This involves a penalty. You either suffer 1 distress marker or seal 3 influence cards. Card sealing means discarding a specific number of cards from the top of your influence deck to the sealed pile. They will remain inactive until unsealed. Should you encounter a game effect allowing you to unseal any such cards, recover them by placing them on the discard pile. Now, let's move to step 2 of the Dreamer's phase, the card and action step. Beginning with the first player and going clockwise, each player performs a round of the Dreamer's phase. Each Dreamer can perform as many rounds as they wish. When they run out of cards or decide to pass, the round ends. Remember, you can always pass your current round and wait for the next one in the same turn. If you prefer a less restricted game, you can also play Etherfields without observing the player order. During step 2 of the Dreamer's phase, the players move and perform actions. Now that you know your basic options, see what it looks like in practice. Your Dreamer's miniatures are waiting on the map. We start our game with the Dreamer's phase, where the first step is to draw cards. All the players simultaneously draw 4 influence cards from their decks to their hands. This is what the tough guy did. The free spirit also draws 4 cards from her influence deck to her hand, which now looks like this. The first turn is started by the tough guy, who plays a yellow intent, allowing him to move. Before we go further, learn the movement principle. One of the basic actions is movement. In order to move, you have to pay for this action with the yellow intent tokens. For each intent you spend, you can move your Dreamer miniature 1 space on the map. So, you can move your character by a number of spaces equal to the total value of the yellow tokens you spent, or less. In this case, I spent 2 intents, so I've moved my character 2 spaces. Every map tile consists of 4 spaces. Both the Dreamers and entities may only move vertically or horizontally. You cannot move diagonally unless a certain game effect allows you to. During movement, pay attention to the walls which block passage. For instance, if a character in the given field wants to move to the upper field, you have to spend 3 yellow intent tokens and go around the wall. Relocation is a type of movement which ignores obstacles, such as walls or range. The tough guy uses the yellow intent token to move to the adjacent spaces, where he performs map actions. In this case, the action is free. It refers you to script 823. The card you played goes to the discard pile. Now, read script 823 from the script book. It will tell you that to open the gate, you have to collect 3 universal markers on the Dream Gate tile. Now, the free spirit begins her first round. She stays on her space as she wants to perform a map action. Before we move on, learn about the principle of gradual actions. Whenever the action cost includes a player icon, like here, it means that the required cost can be paid in several steps, over several rounds, or even over several turns by 1 or more players. For this action, the cost is 3 yellow tokens per player. So, the free spirit plays a card and performs its action. In this case, to collect 3 yellow tokens, it is necessary to seal this card. You learned about sealing cards earlier. The card she used goes to the sealed pile. The free spirit adds 1 yellow intent marker, which in this case is worth 3 yellow intents, thus paying half of the action costs. The tough guy could pay the rest during his turn, but the free spirit decides to add the second half right away. To do so, she plays 2 cards with 3 yellow intents, and puts another yellow intent marker worth 3 intents on the map, which allows her to perform the action, directing her to the relevant script. The markers can now be discarded. Seeing as this action is one time only, place a block token on the map, indicating that this action was already performed. Now, read script 159 from the script book. In the tutorial dream we are playing right now, this script will explain to you the gradual action principle. By performing this action, the free spirit also gained her first universal marker, which should be placed on the Dream Gate tile. Now, the tough guy starts his second round by playing a card and performing its action. He wants to get 3 red intents. The cost of doing so is suffering 1 distress, which he does. He puts the card he just played on the discard pile. Then he plays another card from his hand and performs its action, which requires this card to be sealed. For this, he receives another 3 red intents. This card goes to the sealed pile, and the tough guy manages to gather the 6 required red intents, which allow him to perform a map action. This action also has the block icon, which means it's one time only. Once it's completed, place a block token on the map. Now the tough guy can read script 234, which states that the player gains the second universal marker required to open the gate, which you should place on the Dream Gate tile. Right now, both players decide to finish their rounds. This brings us to Phase 2. That is the Dreamscape, the first step of which is the entity movement and events. Check the current turn card. If there are no active game effects dictating otherwise, and no entities are present on the map, this card is used only to count out the passage of time. This is exactly the case right now, meaning that we should discard this card and reveal the new turn card, thus starting the Dreamer's phase. The first step of the Dreamer's phase is to draw cards. The free spirit has 1 card in hand, so she draws 4 cards from her influence deck. The same applies to the tough guy, who also has 1 card in hand and therefore draws 4 cards from his deck. The rules of card drawing and the hand size limits were already discussed earlier in this video. This turn is started by the free spirit, who plays a card using 2 yellow intents, and moves her miniature to the adjacent space in order to perform a map action there. Here the required cost is 6 green intents. In her hand, the free spirit has 2 cards worth 4 green intents in total, so she still needs 2 green intents to pay the cost of this action. So, she decides to take her chances and boost this action by rolling the luck die. The free spirit rolls 3 dots, which she can add as green intents to those gained earlier from the cards she played. Therefore, she manages to pay the required cost of the action, that is, 6 intents in total. For now, let us briefly refer to the rules in order to learn about the luck die. Once per turn, as part of the basic actions, you can boost your intents, namely movement, assault, contact. Whenever you spend intents from your influence cards to pay for any action, you can decide to roll the luck die in an attempt to add extra intents to pay for this action. But this is not without risk. If you roll 1 dot, add 1 intent of the same color you are using. If you roll 2 dots, add 2 intents. And if you roll 3, add 3 intents. If you roll dash, you don't receive any additional intents. And if you roll X, you have to discard 1 ether, seal 3 intent cards, or suffer 1 distress. Keep in mind that after rolling the luck die, you can no longer add intents from the influence cards to the given action. In the case of a failure, any intents you used are lost, and the influence cards you played are discarded. So, let us now return to the game. The Free Spirit consults script 332. This will tell you how to use the luck die, allowing you to try your luck. Roll the luck die. If you roll 1, 2, or 3 dots, you'll receive the 3rd universal marker necessary to open the secret gate. This concludes the Free Spirits round. So, let's move on to the Tough Guys round. As he stands on a space with a free map action, he performs it and refers to script 823. Only now we already have the 3 required markers collected on the gate tile. You can now remove the markers. Now the script tells you that the secret tile I-01-Z appears in our game. Get the corresponding tile and turn it over. As you can see, it has the A3 symbol on it and has to be placed on the identical symbol on the Dreamscape board. Apart from the new tile, script 823 directs you to another script, number 173, which explains the darkness icon, which you've probably already noticed in the middle of the map tile we just placed. In this case, this symbol affects all 4 spaces of the tile. When an icon is located between 2 spaces, its effect applies to the 2 adjacent spaces. Other icons in the game, such as light, water, or swamp, function in the same way. Let's go back to the script book again. Script 173, which we are currently examining, refers you to another script, number 257. This script instructs you to reveal another secret tile, number I-01-Y. But this secret tile is not a map. An entity appears. In Etherfields, you will also encounter entities during slumbers, but I will discuss this later on in this video. For now, let's learn some theory about the entity tile. In the upper right corner of each entity tile, you can see which miniature or token to get and place it on the map. Next to the name of the entity, you can see its movement value. The entity movement depends on the roll of the movement die. The turn card determines when to use this die. The movement die has 3 possible rolls. This result means that the entity will move by its basic movement value plus the result of another roll. This roll is the base value of the entity's movement, which in this case is 4 spaces. This roll moves the entity by 1 space. Entities always move towards the closest dreamer, unless their special movement rules stipulate otherwise. Whenever an entity enters a space with the dreamer, they stop. If an entity cannot reach its target, it doesn't move. When an entity performs movement and is already in a space with the dreamer, it doesn't move. If there are several entities on the map, perform the movement for each of them separately, rolling the movement die for each of the entities present on the map. You can also decide to roll 1 die for all the entities in the given dream. In that case, all the entities move in accordance with this roll. This method speeds the game up, but it's not preferable. On the entity tile, under its name, you can find the conditions of interacting with it. They refer to contact or assault. In the case of our entity, the assault action requires 6 wrath intents per player. That is 12 red intents in a 2-player game. So, if one of the players has enough red intents per player, which in this situation is at least 6, they place down 1 red intent marker, which in this case is equal to 6 red intents. Whenever the same or another player pays the rest of this action cost by spending 6 more red intents and placing down the red intent marker, the action is completed. Paying the entire cost of this action will let you resolve the following description by relocating the entity to its spawn space. It is worth remembering that your maximum range for the assault action is 1 space. That means it is a ranged action. Certain effects in the game can increase the range. Therefore, you can perform the assault when standing on a space adjacent to the entity or on the same one, like in this example. When performing another basic action, namely contact, follow the same rules that apply to assault. Thus, when performing a contact action marked with the green intent symbol, you have to spend the required number of these intents. Your maximum range for this action is also 1 space, as this is also a ranged action. But various effects in the game can increase this range too. The effects listed at the bottom of the entity tile refer directly to the turn cards, which I shall discuss in detail later in this video. Now, let's talk about the entity spawn spaces. They are the purple icons on the map. If there is more than 1 spawn space available on the map, the players decide where to spawn the entity. And if you have to spawn more entities than there are spawn spaces on the map, distribute them evenly. For example, when spawning 4 entities to 2 spawn points, place 2 of them on each space, instead of 1 entity on 1 space and 3 on the other. Whereas, if the spawn icon on the map bears one of the 4 additional icons referring to the turn suits, see if it matches the active turn suit. If so, the first entity is to be placed on this exact spawn space on the map. Let us now return to the game. Once an entity appears in the game, follow the instructions in the right corner of the tile and place the corresponding miniature. In this case, the human shapeshifter on the spawn space, which is the purple icon on the map. While still on the tough guy's turn, after performing the free action, he also plays a yellow intent from the card, which he then discards. The intent he just spent allows him to move to the adjacent space, thus moving slightly away from the entity which just spawned. This concludes his round. Now, the free spirit begins her second round by using the yellow intent and discarding the influence card in order to move to the adjacent space, where she wants to perform a map action that requires her to have 1 yellow intent. She plays a card granting her 2 yellow intents, losing the excess. Now you can refer to script 179. The free spirit managed to enter a secret tunnel, which allows her to relocate her dreamer miniature to any space on tile A3, regardless of any obstacles, namely the wall. This concludes the free spirit's round. Let's move on to the tough guy, who wants to perform a map action which costs 2 yellow intents. He has those on one of the influence cards in hand. So he plays this card, spending the intents, and can refer to script 30. Here, one of the first pieces of information given is the appearance of the secret card I-01-C, which must be located among the secret cards for this dream. The tough guy reveals this card, which shows a part of the map along with the A2 symbol, corresponding to the same symbol on the map tile. When placing overlay cards on the map tiles, remember to take any tokens from those tiles and place the tokens on top of those overlay cards. As you can see, the map has changed a bit, along with a wall which closed the space and formed a trap. Continuing his round, the tough guy plays a card from his hand, using a yellow intent, in order to move his miniature to the adjacent space, where the free spirit awaits. Once there, he will try to perform a map action which requires 2 green intents per player. So he pays the cost for himself, discarding the influence card. Afterwards, he places a green marker on the map, meaning that he paid for 1 part of this gradual action. This concludes the player's rounds, and therefore the Dreamer's phase. But before we proceed to resolving the Dreamscape phase, let's talk about the turn cards. Each dream consists of a specific number of turns, indicated on the Dream Gate tile, and in this case, it is 9. When preparing the session, shuffle the turn deck and draw a specific number of turn cards, as indicated on the Dream Gate tile. Place them face up in the turn deck slot on the board. Discard the remaining turn cards face down. A new turn card is revealed in each turn. The turn card, which is face up at the top of the deck, is the current turn card, and should be the only visible card in this deck. The current turn card specifies which effects are activated and in what order should they be resolved. There are 4 types of effects in this game: Morphing, Basic Actions, Special Actions, and Entity Movement Die rules. Starting from the top, resolve every step specified on the current turn card. It refers to the effects visible on the entity cards. I will now show you an example of resolving these cards. In the case of this turn card, the first effect to resolve is the basic effect. Refer to the effect described on the entity tile. In this case, every dreamer within 1 space of the entity suffers 1 distress. The second effect is a special one. Again, check this effect on the entity tile. In this case, every dreamer within 2 spaces from the entity has to seal 2 influence cards. The card sealing mechanism was already discussed. Then, roll the entity movement die. If you want to review the entity movement rules, use the contents list under this tutorial. Every turn card has a separate loot section. Resolve it when gaining loot, usually once you successfully complete a slumber. You always receive loot in accordance with the current turn card. If you have to block any step on the current turn card, pick and mark the step by placing a universal marker on it. When you resolve this card, move this marker back to the general pool. If you have to add 1 turn, take the bottom card from the discard pile and put it at the bottom of the turn cards. Each turn card bears the symbol of one of the 4 suits from a classic card deck. They have no effect unless another card or effect addresses them. The dream may end when you run out of turn cards. Then, resolve the out of turns effect described on the Dream Gate tile. Now let's see how to resolve the active turn card effects in our session. The Dreamscape phase has begun. The first step of this phase is the Entity and Dream Event step. In this step, we resolve all the effects of the current turn card. In our current session, the first effect applies to all the dreamers within 1 space of the entity. However, no one is that close. Another effect is Morphing. In this case, it does not apply. So let's move to the movement die roll in order to see how far the entity will go. The die rolls 1 arrow, meaning the entity will move 1 space towards the dreamers. The second step of the Dreamscape phase is to discard the resolved turn card. This reveals a new turn card and concludes the Dreamscape phase. Once again, we proceed to the Dreamers phase. Its first step is to draw influence cards. The Free Spirit starts this round without any cards in hand, so she draws 4 cards from her deck. The Tough Guy also draws 4 influence cards from his deck. The board actions start with the Free Spirit's round, who will try to perform the action on the space she occupies by adding the missing cost of the action. She plays the card with the 2 missing green intents, thus placing a green intent marker on the map and performing this action. Now she can resolve script 326. As the action has been performed, we can discard the markers. The script just added a new tile, I-01-V. On its face, you can see the B3 symbol, indicating where to place it on the map. The Free Spirit continues her round and plays one of the influence cards as a progress card. As you can see at the top of the card, its required cost is 4 yellow intents. She pays this cost by discarding the 2 remaining influence cards from her hand. The cards she used go to the discard pile. The progress card goes to her progress zone at the bottom of the Dreamer board. This card will enable the Free Spirit to move diagonally across the board. Now, let's move to the Tough Guy's first round of this turn, where he plays an influence card with a yellow intent in order to move. He moves his miniature to the bottom space of the adjacent tile. As part of his round, he also performs a basic action, allowing him to peek at 1 card or secret tile of the current dream. With this action, you can take a 5-second peek at one card or secret tile from the current dream. You have to pay for it by discarding a card, but you'll be able to see an influence card, an item, a fate or flaw card, or a slumber tile. Now, continuing his turn, he wants to perform the map action on the space he occupies. The required cost is 2 red intents per player, so in our case, 4 intents in total. He pays 3 intents by playing an influence card and using its action. He gets 1 remaining red intent by spending a red intent from the influence card, which then goes to the discard pile. Now he can refer to script 181, according to which 5 starting item cards appear. Let's talk about items for a moment. Starting items are those without a secret code on the reverse. During the game, you will find more items with this code. The main board has 3 slots for active items that all the dreamers can use. Now, from the 5 starting items, pick 3 which you want to have in the active slot on the board. Put the rest in the storage, face down. They are still owned by the team, but cannot be used until the game allows you to draw an item card. The dreamers can use the item cards by performing their actions or utilizing their effects. After using the action or effect, the items are not discarded unless their card specifically says otherwise. The dreamers can also use item cards when spending intents on actions. After using an item card as an intent, discard it to the storage. When restoring an item, you can draw a random item from the storage and place it on one of 3 free slots on the map. For now, let's go back to the game and the map, where the tough guy continues his turn by moving 1 space down. To do so, he uses 1 hour on the clock and moves his miniature. Now he wants to perform a map action, which requires 3 green intents per player. So, he spends 1 influence card from his hand, bearing 2 green intents. He still needs 4, so he decides to spend the Little Helper's item card, giving him the 4 missing green intents. Thus, he pays the total cost of the action. Performing this action allows him to reveal the secret card I-01-A, which brings masks to the game. Now, take the script book and read script 313. It will tell you to find 16 cards with the secret number II-41-S. That is, mask cards. Now it will tell you everything about the masks. You can find new masks during the campaign, but you can also wear 1 mask at a time. This is your active mask. At the beginning of the session, when setting the game up, you will pick 1 active mask and put it on the stand. A dreamer can use the mask skill at any time during the game. A dreamer can use the mask skill at any time during the game. If you can use the mask skill once per turn, you should somehow mark it as used. When drawing cards at the beginning of each turn, you can refresh any used mask. Now, each player selects 2 mask cards, judging only by their appearance. Then, find the mask tokens corresponding to the cards you choose. At this point, each player decides which of the 2 selected masks to place on the stand as their active mask. At this stage, you can read the abilities of the mask. Put the mask you didn't choose back in the box. Keep both mask cards. This will make it easier to remember which masks are yours when saving the game. You can change the mask for another one you own only if the game instructs you to. When choosing a new mask, you may use it immediately. Then your active mask goes back to the box and the new mask becomes your active one. Now, let's return to the game. The players decided to end their round, which concludes the Dreamers phase and begins the Dreamscape phase, starting from the Entity Movement and Event step. Check the current turn card. The first effect is to roll the Entity Movement die. Let's do so. This roll allows the entity to move 1 space. move the human shapeshifter miniature closer to the dreamers on the map. The second effect on the active turn card is the basic effect. According to the description of this effect, the free spirit who is standing within one space of the entity suffers one distress. The final effect is Morphing, which does not apply in this session, so let's move to the second step of the phase, revealing a new turn card. This concludes the second step of the Dreamscape phase. Another turn starts with the players simultaneously drawing influence cards as part of the first step of the Dreamer's phase. This is the hand of the free spirit, who has drawn 4 influence cards. The tough guy finished the previous turn without any cards in hand, so he draws 4 new influence cards. The free spirit plays her first turn of this round by playing a card from her hand and performing its action. It allows her to place a spirit token on her dreamer board. It could be useful as the game progresses. This card's action is free, so she doesn't have to pay for it, and this influence card is discarded. Then the free spirit spends 2 influence cards for a total of 2 yellow intents. She needs them to move, using the effects of the progress card. She runs away from the entity, moving her miniature diagonally and downwards. After using the effect of this progress card, she has to roll the luck die. Unfortunately, she rolls X, which means she has to flip the progress card. This card becomes inactive. The free spirit will be unable to use the effect of this card until it's reactivated. The free spirit continues her round by performing an action that requires a single green intent. She spends an influence card from hand, paying the cost of this action. Afterwards, she can read script 214 in the script book. As a result, secret card number I-01-B appears in the game. Reveal this card. As you can see, it is marked as B3, meaning you have to put it on the same symbol on the map tile. When placing a card on the map tile, try to align the illustrations as perfectly as possible. Sometimes, like in this case, the card will be slightly slanted. Don't mind this, leave it be. This is the proper placement. See how the new card introduced a new action, allowing you to enter a secret door. The script further instructs you to find tile I-01-W. Do so and reveal this tile. It bears the A1 symbol, so match it to the corresponding map space. This reveals a new space with a new dreamer's entrance, where, according to the script, you have to move your dreamer miniatures. This concludes the round of the free spirit, so let's move to the tough guy's first round. From his hand, he plays a card with 2 yellow intents, discarding it. These intents will let the tough guy move 2 spaces, stopping at a space with the entity spawn icon. Now he performs a map action that requires 1 green intent. He discards the card he used. He manages to perform the action, allowing him to take 1 shining gem from the pool. In his hand, the tough guy has a card that allows him to obtain another shining gem whenever he stands on a space with the entity spawn icon, like in this instance. He plays that card, receiving the second shining gem. In the next step, he uses 1 hour on the clock to move 1 space. This ends his round. The free spirit passes, thus concluding the Dreamer's phase. Now we move on to the Dreamscape phase, the first part of which is the entity movement and event step. The first effect from the active turn card is a special effect. Seeing as the tough guy is within 2 spaces of the entity, he has to seal 2 influence cards from his deck. The second effect is a basic one, and the tough guy, standing within 1 space of the entity, suffers 1 distress. However, he now decides to use the special skill of his dreamer. It allows him to avoid 1 distress during the Dreamscape phase. To use the skill, he has to pay for its use, namely 2 red intents. The tough guy has to discard a card from his hand to pay for the necessary cost of his skill. He puts the card he just played on the discard pile. He also discards the deck card with the special effect that he just used. This prevented him from suffering distress from the entity. Back to the current turn card. Now you have to roll the entity movement die and move the entity on the map. This roll allows the entity to move by 1 space. Now you can proceed to the second step by discarding the turn card and revealing a new turn card. This concluded the Dreamscape phase. We start the Dreamers phase with drawing influence cards. The tough guy has no cards in hand, so he should draw 4 new influence cards. Yet he only has 3 influence cards left in his deck. The tough guy's influence deck ran out, so he has to make a new one. To do so, he reshuffles his discard pile. That gives him a new deck to draw from. Yet he has to suffer a reshuffle penalty, that is 1 distress, or sealing 3 influence cards after creating the new deck. The tough guy decides to suffer 1 distress. Now he draws the 4th missing influence card from the new deck. The Free Spirit also has no cards in hand, so she draws 4 new influence cards, but her deck still has some cards left in it. The tough guy begins his round by performing the assault action from the entity tile. The cost of the assault is 6 red intents per player, which in our case means 12 intents, necessary to move the entity to its spawn space. This means a chance to imprison it. The tough guy starts collecting the red intents by playing 3 influence cards. In total, this gives him 5 red intents. He also decided to use 4 red intents from the item card provided from the strategic plan. There are still 3 red intents missing from the necessary 12. So, he decides to try his luck. Unfortunately, the first roll is a failure. As the tough guy has the shining gems, he uses one of them to re-roll the dice. Yet, the re-roll is just as bad. So the tough guy uses his last shining gem and rolls the die once more. He needs 3 dots and achieves it with this roll. Thus, he manages to collect a total of the 12 necessary red intents, allowing him to perform an action from the entity tile. As a result, he can imprison the entity behind the wall, which concludes his round. It's time for the round of the Free Spirit, who decides to use her mask ability, allowing her to move from a darkness space to another darkness space. Her miniature moves to space with the secret door. Once there, having met the range requirement, she performs a map action which costs 3 green intents. She performs a card action and gathers these intents. According to the description of this action, the card has to be sealed, and the Free Spirit enters the secret door and reads script 133. In essence, it tells her that the Dreamers won. After resolving the victory, let's set up another part of the session. Find the cards marked as II-41-L for each player. If further on in the game the players manage to meet conditions of this card, refer to the specified script. Place the card itself next to the Dreamer board. Then find 4 tiles marked as II-36-A. 2 of them are starting tiles, which are about to form a slumber map. Place them all in the indicated slot on the board. Then find tiles II-37A, B, C, and D, which are slumber tiles. Reshuffle these slumber tiles. As you can see, one of them is green. Put it at the bottom of the slumber deck you just created. The deck itself goes to the indicated slot on the board. Now pick the Dream Gate tiles, numbers II-39B and II-39O. You have a special envelope to keep those tiles in. Put them in there. They will come in useful a bit later. Next, find the secret card number I-01D. It is a wisdom card, which you should put inside the transparent holder. In a moment, I will show and explain to you all the symbols you can see here. Another step is to find the tiles I-01-S and I-01T, which are Dreamworld Map Tiles. Put them in the transparent tile holder and place the whole thing on the board, matching the tile symbols to the corresponding symbols in the bottom section of the board. Now, get the team marker and put it on the awakening location of the Dreamworld map you just created. Let's go back to the box. Find 3 cards marked as II-41-C. These are the shopping cards. Put them in storage on the main board. I will show you how to use them later in this video. Now, find 6 cards marked as II-41I. They are season cards. Use them to create a season deck without changing the card order. The first card to be revealed in this deck is the Ordinary Days card. Place this deck in the season card slot on the board. During the game, the season cards will change and affect the game, as well as change the rules. Now, search the box again for card II-41M. This is the Awakening card. Put it in the transparent Wisdom card holder. During your sessions, when on the Dreamworld map, you can always decide to resolve the Awakening effect. In this case, follow the instructions on this card, which I will discuss in a moment. Now, let's resolve the individual steps of the Awakening. Every player discards all the influence cards from their hand, their progress zone, and their deck. Each player heals all their distress and recovers all of their sealed influence cards. The players discard all of their keys and shining gems. Each player reshuffles all of their cards, forming a new influence deck and placing it next to the Dreamer board. Then, shuffle the cards from the influence market, taking them from the box. This is also where you shuffle the item cards, which appear as the game progresses. Right now, the players can change their Dreamers by referring to script 101 in the script book. The players can choose a new Dreamer or swap them with another player, provided they both agree to do so. At this stage, all the players rebuild their influence deck. Let me recall some information about the limits. During setup, or the Awakening, you will complete the deck building stage. It will let you add and remove cards from your influence deck. Remember to check the number of cards in your deck during this step. Initially, you must have at least 20 influence cards. Your maximum limit is 40 cards. Excess cards are placed back in the box. If the number of cards in your influence deck drops under 20 or exceeds 40 during the game, nothing happens. The card limit is only checked during the deck building step, which is now. During this step, you must add all the Flaw cards in your possession. They do not count toward the limit. Each player selects one of their masks to be the active one. Now, restore 3 items, picking them from the item pool in the storage, and place them in the 3 board slots. Now, let's clear the Dreamscape board. Discard the cards and tiles you used in the current dream, which in our case are cards and tiles marked I-01. Then, draw 2 tiles from the Slumber Map deck, marked as II-36A. Reveal and place them on the Dreamscape board, as indicated by the corresponding symbols. In this case, slots B2 and B3. Place the Dreamer miniatures in the Dreamer entrance space on the map tile. Now, prepare the Flaw deck and the Fate deck. Reshuffle each deck separately and place it in the appropriate slots on the board. I will tell you more about them later in this video. Now, enter the Dream World with me. The players start their Dreamworld adventure as a team at the Awakening location, where the team marker used to track the Dreamer's path on this map is already awaiting. When traveling along this map, you'll be able to prepare for your next dream. For example, by buying influence cards or items. Your primary goal is to collect the keys required to enter the dream. So it's worth checking how many keys you need and where to go on the Dreamworld map in order to enter a new dream. The broad arrows on the map show the paths between the locations. indicating the direction of the team movement. The team moves on the board, following the direction of the path. You can also take shortcuts marked by the thin arrows. Just like the paths, they also go in one direction only. But remember, fast travel comes at a cost. The edges of the map tiles show the cost of taking shortcuts. Usually, different map tiles have different shortcut costs. If you take a shortcut to an adjacent tile, resolve the shortcut effect of the tile you left. That's enough theory. Now, let's make our first move with the T marker, landing on the location with a question mark, which means we have to reveal the upper fate card. Let's resolve it. According to the description of this card, you have to place it next to the board. And if you want to take a shortcut, discard it without paying the cost of this action. Before we go any further, let me tell you a bit more about the fate cards. They are short interludes, small adventures or events that will sometimes ask you to make a choice. Each fate card contains all the rules needed to resolve it. In a moment, I will show you how the other fate cards work. After resolving a fate card, unless it states otherwise, place it at the bottom of the fate card deck. While we're here, let me explain the flaw cards too. Believe me, you really don't want the flaw cards in your deck, but sooner or later, some will find their way there. The flaw cards give you various negative effects and work as your flaws. If the game tells you to draw one flaw card, pick one card from the flaw deck and place it on the top of your discard pile. Flaw cards don't count towards the influence card limit. Whenever you draw a flaw card from your influence deck, you have to immediately resolve its effect. Then, discard this card, unless stated otherwise. You can remove most of the flaw cards from your deck at the cost of 1 ether. When you do so, place the flaw card at the bottom of the flaw deck on the main board. Now, let's return to the Dreamworld map and take the next step. We move the team marker to the location with the red exclamation mark. Now, we have to reveal a slumber tile. Once revealed, the slumber tile has to be resolved. If there was an entity here, we would move to the Dreamscape board. In this situation, the conditions of this event are not met, so this slumber ends immediately. Move the tile to the bottom of the slumber deck. Now we can go back to the Dreamworld map, moving the team marker as indicated by the arrows. Here you can see the familiar question mark icon. It means we have to draw another fate card. What appears is a so-called Quirk card. Read the description on the white background at the top of the card to learn that now we have to draw one tile from the Slumber Map Tiles deck and place the Quirk card on this tile in the designated space. Just like you can see on the screen right now, Quirk cards modify our Slumber map. In the case of this specific card, you also have to reshuffle the entire Fate deck. Back on the Dreamworld map, we make another move to a location with 3 icons. The first one is a key, the second one is a question mark, and the third is an exclamation mark. In locations with more than 1 icon, you have to resolve the effects one by one, starting from the left. In this case, the key is the first one. You will need it to enter the gate to the dream, so take a key token and place it in storage. The second effect to resolve is to draw another fate card. In the case of the card we just revealed, you have to choose between 2 options. In our game, both players decide to pick the first option, that is to seal 2 cards from their influence deck. The third and final effect for this space is the exclamation mark. Draw a new tile from the Slumber deck. And you can see an entity appeared. Before you begin your encounter with this entity, let me explain to you what a Slumber entity tile is and how it differs from a Dream entity tile. As you already know, you reveal the Slumber tiles by traveling the Dreamworld map and entering a location with an exclamation mark. If you find an entity tile, you automatically move to the Dreamscape board, where you start playing the Slumber, taking a break from your travel on the Dreamworld map. Slumbers are simple and short adventures. In most of them, you will encounter dangerous entities. A dream entity tile will appear when playing a dream on the Dreamscape board. For example, as a result of an active script, as you have already seen in the first part of this video. In the upper right corner of the Slumber entity tile, you can see the number of turns required to complete the Slumber. In this case, it's 4 turns. On other Slumber tiles, this is where you can see what you have to do before starting the given Slumber. But a dream entity tile has no turn number specified. As in a dream, the number of turns required to complete it is specified at the bottom of the Dream Gate tile for this particular dream. On both tiles, this is where you can also see what token or miniature to use during the Slumber or the dream. In the case of both entities, their tiles also specify the conditions of interacting with this entity. They are specified under the name of the entity, along with the number of intents required to perform the action. In the case of the Slumber entity, this section may specify the conditions of defeating this entity. Below, on every entity tile, both in Dreams and Slumber, you can find 3 types of effects activated by the current turn card in the Dreamscape phase during the entity and event step. An important difference between a Dream tile and a Slumber tile is the information at the bottom of the Slumber tile, allowing you to skip it. For most Slumbers, you can decide to skip them at the beginning of the turn, without resolving them. This has consequences, as specified in the indicated script. In this example, it is script 770. For some Slumber tiles, this is where you will find the victory conditions, which means that in order to defeat this entity, the dreamers have to survive until the end of the number of turns designated for this Slumber. When the last card of the turn deck is discarded, resolve the Out of Turns effect, as shown at the bottom of the tile. This also leads us to the specific script, in this case, 770. The Deliverance effect visible in the bottom right corner does not apply at this stage of the game. You will learn more about this as the game progresses. So let's return to our session, where together we'll prepare to encounter the entity that has just appeared. First, prepare a turn deck consisting of 4 cards. Then let's summon the entity, in this case by placing the entity token on the space with the entity spawn icon. Let me just remind you that we already discussed the rules of spawning entities. Click the list of topics under this video to watch the corresponding section. Just like any dream, a Slumber begins with the Dreamer's phase, where the first step is to draw influence cards. The Free Spirit starts the first round by spending 1 yellow intent from an influence card in order to move to the adjacent space. The card is discarded and the Dreamer miniature moves 1 space on the Slumber map. This concludes her round. The Tough Guy decides to spend 2 yellow intents by discarding 1 card in order to move 2 spaces on the Slumber map. The Tough Guy ends his round. When meeting this entity, the players can expel it when it's located in a non-darkness space, and as long as they collect 6 red intents or yellow intents per player. For our Slumber, this means 12 intents of 1 color in total. If successful, the player will be able to collect the loot and the Slumber will end with their victory. Now that the Dreamers finish their rounds, let's check the effect from the current turn card. The first effect is Morphing, instructing you to add 1 random morphing token to the entity tile. Now, I'll tell you more about adding the morphing tokens and the meaning of their types. Whenever the game tells you to add morphing tokens, choose the specified number at random and place them face up on the entity tile. The morphing tokens boost your opponents, making them stronger. Now, let's see what types of morphing tokens exist in Etherfields. Thanks to these tokens, the entity will inflict an additional distress during its attack, provided it can attack. For these, each player will have to seal 2 additional influence cards. When this morphing is active, the entity movement value is increased by 2 spaces. For our entity, this would mean 4 spaces. If the entity doesn't move, this token has no effect. These tokens increase the entity's range by 1 space. As long as this morphing is on the entity tile, the players cannot use their active mask effects. This token makes all the progress cards inactive. As long as this token is on the entity tile, the players cannot re-roll their die results. In this case, the players cannot use their shining gems to re-roll, though they still spend them to pay the action costs. Finally, some good news. One of the basic actions is the ability to remove morphings. To do so, discard 1 key or spend 1 ether, while the entity is within 1 space of you. Now, let's go back to the game. Place 1 random morphing token, and from now on, obey its effect. The next step would be to discard all the light tokens from the map, but we have none of those. Another effect of the turn card is a special effect. Every dreamer within 1 space has to spend 1 shining gem, suffer 1 distress, or seal 2 influence cards. As both our dreamers are out of this range, no one will suffer. The third and final effect of the active turn card is to roll the movement die and see how far the entity moves. Following this roll, the entity moves 1 space, always towards the dreamers. During the second step of the Dreamscape phase, we discard the resolved turn card, thus revealing a new turn card which now becomes active. So let's move back to another Dreamers phase. The first step is for all the players to draw influence cards up to their hand limit, which in this case means that each player draws 3 cards in order to reach the hand limit of 6. The Free Spirit begins her round by playing a yellow intent card in order to move 1 space towards the entity. Next, she performs an influence card action, allowing her to place the light token on any space of the map tile. This places the light token on the field with the entity, changing the darkness effect of this space into the light effect, active until the end of this turn. Next, the Free Spirit decides to perform part of the assault action on the entity tile, as the condition of interacting with it has been met. The entity is not on a darkness space. In total, the players require 12 red intents. The Free Spirit wants to contribute 6 intents. So she plays a card and uses its effect. It gives her 3 red intents. The cost of this action is to suffer 1 distress. Then she plays another influence card by resolving its action, which in this case is free, but grants her 3 more red intents. After its use, this card has to be sealed. Therefore, the Free Spirit has the 6 required intents and can place a red intent marker on the entity tile, thus completing half of the assault action. Now let's move to the tough guy, who spends 3 influence cards from his hand, worth 6 red intents in total. This completes the required cost of assaulting this entity. Therefore, the dreamers manage to expel it. Now they can collect the loot. You always do so from the current turn card. In this case, each dreamer receives 1 ether. The slumber is now completed, which means you have to clean up before returning to the Dreamworld map. Discard all the tokens from the map tiles. That is the entity token and the light token. Also, discard the morphing token, along with the intent markers from the entity tile. As for the tile itself, turn it face down and place it at the bottom of the Slumber tile deck. Place the remaining turn cards from the deck face up on the unused turn cards. When cleaning up after a slumber, don't discard the dreamer miniatures. Leave them where they are on the map until the next slumber. Also, do not discard map tiles and quirk cards. When you start another slumber, you'll go back to this map and resume the game from where your dreamer miniature awaits. After completing a slumber, don't discard any influence cards from your hand. Also, don't remove any progress cards, shining gems, or other bonuses, unless any special rules state otherwise. Do not shuffle your influence deck or the discard pile. You will move back to the Dreamworld map with your current card status. Remember that in order to use influence cards when on the Dreamworld map, you need to have them in your hand or active in the progress zone, as there is no card draw step when playing on the Dreamworld map. So let's go back to the Dreamworld map, where we make 5th movement with the T marker and land on a space with another exclamation mark. So now we take a Slumber tile, resolve it, and place it at the bottom of the Slumber tile. Another clockwise move on the Dreamworld map puts us on the shopping location. Now, using the shopping cards from the storage, each player can purchase influence cards or items from the market. The influence card market is a pool of unacquired influence cards waiting in the box. This market will grow during the campaign. Certain dreams may add new cards to the pool. The influence cards lost by the dreamers during the campaign will also end up here. So, whenever the game allows you, like in this case, to buy cards from the market pool, you can draw the top 3 influence cards from the market and buy any number of them. Let me remind you that the card action cost is expressed in Ether, and you can always see it in the upper right corner of every card. Return any card you didn't buy to the bottom of the market deck. In our tutorial session, the Free Spirit bought 2 influence cards, spending all of her Ether. The Tough Guy decided not to purchase any cards, so he gains 1 shining gem. When the game asks you to return a card to the influence market, it means you lose this card. Remove this card from your deck and put it at the bottom of the influence market. During the buying card step, if you draw a starting card of another dreamer, you may buy this card, paying with Ether as usual. You can use the special action on the back of this card, even if you are not that dreamer. When you buy a new influence card, add it to your discard pile. After shopping, return the shopping card to the secret cards in the box. If the players have no shopping cards in storage when traveling the Dreamworld map, the shopping location effect is not resolved. This place is treated as an empty location. Now, let's go back to our session, where the players move to the location with the Dream Gate icon. Take the Dream Gate tile corresponding to this space. It will tell you that you need 2 keys to enter the dream. As you only have 1 key so far, you cannot enter this dream yet. So, let's continue our journey. Another clockwise move puts our T marker on a location with a question mark and an exclamation mark. This determines the order of resolving the effects of this location, starting from the left. So first, draw a Fate card. This card requires the players to make a choice. They decide to choose the second option. That is reshuffling the Fate card deck. The exclamation mark on the Dreamworld map location where the T marker is located sends you back to the Slumber deck. As you can see, a green Slumber tile is already waiting. It's a delta phase consisting of 3 points. Now, resolve the effects from this tile one after another. From the first point, each player can choose one of the 5 effects you can see here. Therefore, you can heal all your distress. You can unseal all your influence cards. You can unflip your flipped progress cards by turning them face up. You can reshuffle your influence deck without penalty, or restore an inactive mask. The second step of resolving the delta phase effects is to reset the clock. The new setting depends on the number of the players. For our 2-player game, we must set the counter at 4 hours. As part of the last step, shuffle the Slumber deck cards and remember to place the green delta phase tile at the bottom of the deck, which then goes to the respective board slot. Done. Now, let's go back to the Dreamworld map, where we move to another space containing a sanctuary, where each dreamer may choose one of the 4 available options. They can reshuffle their influence deck without suffering the penalty. They can also unflip 1 progress card. Alternatively, they can unseal one chosen influence card or restore one item. In our session, both players decided to unseal one influence card each. So let's return to the Dreamworld map, where the team uses a shortcut to move to an adjacent location. The cost of using the shortcut is shown at the bottom of this map tile. In this case, the players have to either flip over one of their progress cards or seal one of their influence cards. If any of the players has an empty deck, they cannot go with the second option. If they also had no active progress card, the team wouldn't be able to take this shortcut. This is because each player has to pay this cost individually. Then the team moves over consecutive locations of the Dreamworld map, resolving their effects in order to find a key. I won't be showing you this again. We move across the map in the same way I showed you earlier. As soon as you have the quantity of keys required to cross the Dream Gate, you can head towards the location with the Dream Gate icon on the given map tile. When you reach this space, take the respective Dream Gate tile. As you are now in Suburbia, you have to take the Dream Gate tile marked as II-39B, which requires 2 keys. So in order to enter this dream, you have to discard these 2 keys from the storage. Then you have to clean up the Dreamscape board, discarding the Quirk cards and the Slumber Map Tiles. Place the Quirk cards at the bottom of the Fate deck, and place the Slumber Map Tiles at the bottom of the Slumber Map Tiles deck. Now, resolve the setup section of the Dreamgate tile. First, each player can now cure 2 distresses or unseal 2 top influence cards from their sealed pile. Another step of setting up a dream is to find all the tiles and secret cards numbered I-02. Find them and take them out of the box. Then, resolve all the I-02 tiles marked as Setup in the upper right corner. Reveal them and match them to the symbols on the Dreamscape board. In our case, these are A1 and A2, respectively. Place your Dreamer miniature on the Dreamer's entrance space on the map. Another step of setting up the dream is to find tile I-02Z and place it on space C1 without revealing it. Now, reveal card I-02A. It will remain active until the end of the dream. In our case, by spending 2 yellow or green intents, that is by paying the cost of action from this card, you'll be able to resolve a script at the space your dreamer is in. In our case, this would be script 116, which, as usual, can be found in the script book. Another step of the setup is to reveal card I-02E and to place it face up on the entity card and tile slot on the board. Now, take 4 cards labeled I-02B. They are items and they represent the pool of the items you'll be able to find during the stream, somewhere in the darkness. Now, it's time to prepare the turn deck. As you can see, on the Dreamgate tile, it will consist of 12 turn cards. Take the turn cards, shuffle them, and place them in the corresponding board slot face up. Then, read the introduction in script 890 in the script book. During the stream, the player's goal is to find and liberate the Dream Monger. Learn the hints and check out the special rules. They may come in handy during this session. If you run out of turns, refer to script 425 in the script book. Now you're ready to begin another dream in Etherfields. Lastly, let me tell you about several important aspects. What happens when a dreamer dies? When a dreamer suffers an 8th distress, they die immediately. This means that all the players lose. The team also loses when the distress marker pool runs out. There are 16 of them, so be careful when playing with more people. There is one last condition. If a player has less than 6 cards, inducing their hand, deck, and discard pile. They die and the entire team loses the game. Limit of miniatures and tokens per space. In Etherfields, you will encounter various entities. Now let's talk about the maximum number of miniatures and tokens that you can place on a single map space. Each map space can hold a maximum of 4 miniatures and/or entity tokens, after which such a space is considered to be full. Dreamers can move through full spaces but cannot stop in them. Entities can enter full spaces by pushing dreamers out of such a space and into any adjacent space. However, if the full space contains only one dreamer, that dreamer cannot be pushed out. The entity ends its movement in range 1 of that full space. Some entities are much bigger than others. They are called big entities. They occupy the whole space they stand in and cannot be pushed out in any way. But certain effects from cards or scripts can force them to move. When a big entity enters a space, it pushes all other miniatures and/or entity tokens in that space to any adjacent space chosen by the players. Now that you know all the rules of Etherfields, see how to save the progress of your game. Anytime you are on the Dreamworld map, after resolving the effects of your current location, you may pause and save your campaign. How to do it? In order to not lose the ether you've collected, you may now resolve the buying influence step. We have already discussed the mechanism of buying cards. Use the description below to go to that section of the video. After buying, if you still have some ether, discard it and take one secret card, II-41R. Regardless of how many ether you discarded, take only one such card. To save the game without losing your current campaign progress, resolve steps 1 through 3 from the Awakening card. To do so, each player discards all of the influence cards from their hand, deck, and progress zone. They heal all their distressed and regain all the sealed influence cards. Then discard all the keys and shining gems they may possess. Another thing to do is to place all the cards and tiles in their corresponding slots in the box, using the proper dividers to segregate and mark them. Place all the Dreamgate tiles you have in the special envelope. Place any tokens, markers, and other game components that you used in the box. And now an important remark. If you want to save the game during a slumber or a dream, you have to follow the Dreamer's Death Protocol. Now, dear player, I shall leave you to enjoy the rest of the game. Come back here whenever you need a refresher on the rules of the game. Remember that you can always learn about the rules that interest you. You can easily find them using the table of contents in the description under this video. It has been my pleasure to introduce you to Etherfields.